Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for this month's Genius Metaversity podcast. In a couple of moments, Roger will be joining us alongside James Turing, Alan Turing's grandnephew and part of the Turing Trust. The theme today is AI for good. So once again, thank you very much for joining us from all around the world. I hope you really enjoy this edition. And if Roger's ready, over to you.
Hi, it's Roger Hamilton here with another awesome podcast. Very excited by this session where we get an opportunity to speak with James Turing, who is the great nephew of Alan Turing, who is the grandfather of AI. We have James on here right now. So James, how are you today?
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Roger. How about yourself?
Very good. Really excited by what you're doing and what we're going to be doing together. And we're going to have a chance in this podcast to share more about it as we go. Let me do this just to get started so everyone gets a bit of a idea of who you are, what you've been doing, and why we are calling this podcast AI for Good. It's been incredible developments in AI, and we're going to be sharing some of that as we go forward as well. And I'm going to be leaving this up for a moment so everyone can have a read of this as we go forward, which is the biography for you. I'm going to add a couple of things in here so everyone gets an idea of just how much James is following this in the footsteps of IT that his great uncle really kicked off. And as it says here, inspired by the groundbreaking work of his great granduncle, Alan Turing. Is that right? Is it great uncle or great granduncle?
Just great uncle.
It's a great uncle. I thought so, right? Okay, so great uncle Alan Turing. James has dedicated his career to furthering the principles and applications of AI and I know IT in various domains. Sought after speaker, James has presented his research and ideas at numerous conferences, engaged with diverse audiences ranging from policymakers to industry leaders. Ability to bridge the gap between complex technical concepts, ethical considerations has made him a respected voice within the AI community. I know that one of the biggest pieces, which is obviously what brought us together as well, was the whole Turing Trust and what you're doing with the Turing Trust as well. But just before we get onto the Turing Trust, I would love for us to share for a moment one of the things that actually brought us together, which was that we announced within Genius Group that our chief AI officer was an Alan Turing AI. It created some controversy online. It got like some 2 million views on Twitter. And during all of that, we got connected up together. And now we're doing what we're doing right now as well. I'd love for you to just share your sense of where the world is right now with AI, the fact that many people know about the Turing Trust, the Turing test, and how the Turing test basically, links with this idea that AI at one point will be pretty much, interchangeable or unmistakable from a human. And we're really seeing a pretty incredible world that we're stepping into right now. And how that whole picture of clearly a legacy of your great uncle has also led you into the footsteps of things you've done as well. So would love for you to just riff a little bit about basically how you see the world today and how you've been on this journey of your own.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly from when I was growing up, the world has changed immeasurably in terms of how we're using technology these days. The idea of not being able to get Google Maps on your phone is almost unimaginable these days, whereas obviously, particularly in Alan's time, then the idea of some such software doing things like that was crazy enough in itself. So in lots of ways, AI is enabling all kinds of leaps and bounds to happen in terms of how we're developing those technologies, some for good, some for bad. But definitely things like the Turing test are becoming closer to being redundant these days, certainly. Given the way that Alan first initially proposed it, I think several of those tests have been beaten, obviously. But in terms of how things are being used in these days with capture tests, etc., then it's living on in slightly different ways. But certainly those changes are pretty monumental. But certainly from my perspective, what it means for us and what it means for the Turing Trust. So just a little bit of background. to the charity that my family founded about 15 years ago now, in honor of my great uncle Alan. Basically, our mission is to enable every student on the planet to get an opportunity to learn how to use a computer, as we think that basically the technologies that Alan helped to bring us are pretty fundamental to modern life these days, and everyone without that opportunity to learn those vital digital skills is certainly in need of a little bit of extra support to make sure they can benefit from those technologies. So what that really means for us, and what I'm kind of a positive sign, if you like, is that as the growth of technology continues, we are seeing more and more companies sort of also get behind that ethical mission of, yes, they are fundamental to life these days, and we should be doing our bit to try and make the most of those technologies. So what that means in terms of when you're looking at replacing your old computer, well, what good can you do with the old one? And they're obviously fantastic resources for learning. While they might not be suitable for running the latest software because they might not have the best graphics cards or something, then you can certainly pass them off to a charity like the Turing Trust, and we can not only reuse them in schools, which is obviously has a tremendous social impact, but also save the environmental impacts of those machines being prematurely recycled too.
Well, it was actually really interesting as we were looking at all the coincidences, the fact that like, you know, the Turing Trust has a big presence in Malawi, and my grandmother was brought up in Malawi before she went back to Peebles, just outside of Edinburgh. And, you know, obviously, you know, you're in, you know, the Turing Trust is based in Scotland, and just all of those different coincidences in terms of like the African connection, and then how that then evolved into kind of like, you know, but both, I mean, I'm a Hamilton, right? So also like very Scottish in terms of like background, and how that all linked to also just a number of different things when we were both sharing the first time we spoke some time ago. I think it's like very interesting, just all these synchronicities that have been happening. Would love for you to share just from your family history point of view, and then the connection with Scotland, with Africa as well. So that, again, our audience gets an idea of just basically, because many of them already know my story and how I've evolved over time. I have a Chinese mother, so a little bit different from that point of view. But basically, you know, that connection I'd love, and I'd also love you just to share what it was like, you know, being someone who is connected with someone who is so instrumental to the whole growth of the IT industry that we see all around us right now. Did that play much of an influence when you were younger? Was it something you weren't really that aware of until you're older? That would be like really interesting to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it was very strange as a journey growing up as a kid. So certainly Alan was mentioned around the dinner table dozens of times when we were growing up. It was quite an interesting time because the documents had all been released and sort of declassified. That was an ongoing process sort of through my childhood. And so suddenly things like Bletchley Park became an actual amazing large museum from a shell of what was, I think, BT at some point owned the buildings and they were using it for a cell tower or something very bizarre like that. And you're like, okay, it's an absolute change shift for those guys. But also public awareness of Alan became very much more mainstream during those days. So don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's plenty of IT guys out there who'd say, I knew about Alan in the 90s. And you're like, yes, definitely you did. But until he was sort of portrayed by Benedict Cumberbatch in The Invitation Game, I don't think most people were that aware of Alan and the legacy that he'd left behind. And whilst he might have been there in the IT circles, certainly as I grew up, particularly sort of after the film, we saw that widespread public interest, which was really something we were really pleased to see with from the point of the charity, because that sort of helped us get that more mainstream acceptance of like, okay, let's pay 2 seconds of attention to the name Turing and figure out what this is all about. Okay, cool, we can do something nice with our computers. So certainly it's been quite a journey from that perspective. And yes, the Scottish connection is all quite funny. I mean, certainly Alan's got plenty of Scottish ancestors, although we haven't quite made it back up to the Turing family home, if you like, is near Aberdeen. Although to be fair, the Turing estate has fallen into the sea, from my understanding, thanks to coastal erosion. So there's nothing really up there to go see anymore that's directly linked to us.
Yeah. I took my 3 kids to see Hamilton Palace, which was apparently one of the like grandest palaces in all of Europe when it was first built. And it's now Tesco's car park, right? Like where the palace was, it's like being, you know, totally raised. And there's just this tiny little, it's called a museum, but it's actually more like a room, which has got like, you know, some of the final pictures of Hamilton Palace. So you're not alone. It's quite amazing how much, you know, I heard this very interesting thing when I was in Japan, when they basically said, you know why it is that all of the Japanese greatest monuments still exist today, even though that was thousands of years ago when they were around. And this was from, you know, a Japanese scholar. And so I was like, why is this the case? And he says, well, it's because we wanted them to last forever, so we built them out of wood, so we could keep on replacing the wood and know that they're always going to be new. Whereas you crazy people in the West built everything out of stone and things that erode. And so you wonder why the things that you built thousands of years ago has now disappeared. Although, okay, that's actually quite wise, right? Very interesting. But sorry, I disturb you. So so that was the family estate. How about the Turing family? How has that evolved over time?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think history is a amazingly humbling thing that we should all be wary of somewhat. But yeah, so the Turings are originally sort of all over the UK. We've got Irish cousins in there as well as plenty of time living in England. But no, more of us are living in Scotland these days. I think my brother's the only one left in England at the moment, as well as, of course, plenty of cousins as well. But yes, we're all a bit closer to Edinburgh. So the idea of your connections with peoples were quite amazing. Kind of seeing how small the world can be sometimes. It's probably the 6-degree rule is pretty accurate, I would say.
Yeah, my dad went to Edinburgh Academy with his brother, who then ended up at the Bank of Scotland for many, many years. And well, my dad went traveling around the world, and that's how he ended up with an Asian or a Chinese mother and an Asian upbringing. And it's actually very interesting. Like I mentioned to you as well that I'd been to, I was at Musselburgh School before I went off to Cambridge, and going back, I ran the Edinburgh Marathon when I came back a couple of years ago, just after COVID, and it was amazing because it actually finishes right down at Musselburgh, right next to the school, right? And so that was like such an experience, just going back to those same experiences as well. And like, you know, as a teenager growing up in Edinburgh and Peebles, it's one of the most amazing places. And my daughter, Teresa, ended up going back to Scotland to do her studies to be a vet because it's just such a beautiful place. It's really interesting how the whole IT industry and what we see today is traditionally thought of as something kind of birthed out of Silicon Valley and out of, you know, all of these, you know, huge, you know, US trillion-dollar companies we have today. And then to think actually like a lot of that initial thinking, the inception of it really came from, you know, that base, right? Which was really the science base and the electronics base, you know, leading to basically all of those developments, which happened obviously Bletchley Park during the war, like out of necessity, you know, code breaking, and how those same things that basically were on one hand trying to break codes and basically think about what are smarter ways that we can be doing this so that we can win the war, have gone like 360 degrees or 180 degrees. So we're now in a position where we're actually, you know, using algorithms and using like the whole basis of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is all based on us now having cryptography, which is to protect us as opposed to what we had before, which was to you know, keep things private for the wrong reasons. Now it's for the right reasons. How do you see this as you're going forward with the Turing Trust, and obviously what you decided, the inception of that? I'd love for you to just share, you know, how you see AI and IT for good versus, like you said earlier, you know, can be also used for bad. And how you see the Turing Trust can be a part of the right side of the equation.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think for us, it really stems from that kind of it comes back to sort of Alan's story in lots of different ways, but fundamentally at the core of Alan's story is the tragedy of his death. And for us, that really kind of implies the loss that the world had in terms of opportunity if people are treated differently to others. And consequently, if you treat people badly, lots of other bad things happen, which is a great shame and detriment to the world. So from our perspective, the kind of, well, what can we go and do about it for us is really, well, let's just share the benefits of technology. And we've managed to make things work so that we can provide sort of data destruction services and free logistics and things like that for our IT donors, so that we make it really easy for you to just turn around and say, right, let me donate my old computer here, and you guys will go put it to good use. And then, of course, we'll take care of it a long time afterwards, make sure it's maintained in those schools for several years before eventually we do recycle it when it's truly end of life and no longer really even serves a function as a typewriter anymore. And so for us, it really comes from that point of equality and equity in terms of, well, what can we do to make the world a fairer place? And particularly with computers, there's an obvious opportunity for us there in terms of, well, we can make sure that everyone gets an equal opportunity to learn how to use the devices in the first place. And then when we do that, you will inevitably start to see a bit of dispersion in terms of, yes, Silicon Valley will probably be dominant for a fair while, but actually there's loads of amazing innovation that happens globally, and we'll hopefully start to see much more of that happening in countries that you haven't heard of quite as often in the same breath as Silicon Valley. Certainly, I know Kenyans have been working hard on rebranding their Silicon Savannah, so fingers crossed that we might see a Malawian equivalent in the next few years too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very interesting. You know, everyone knows the story about how in Africa it really did leapfrog the whole PC market to some extent. So everyone ends up with like smartphones, and with AI, the same is now being said, right? Like, you know, how AI is being used, you know, for the environment, how it's being used for agriculture. We're seeing there's that same potential happening. It's very interesting also, you know, in places like Indonesia, which is where we have a base in Bali, and where, you know, Elon Musk was just there recently. Starlink now is giving access to, you know, these thousands of islands that have never had internet access at all, and that's going to just totally change the entire country in terms of activating its people to be able to be online and in ways, and to access AI in ways that they never could before, which is quite amazing. And a lot of people won't know. I didn't know, right, until you shared it with me, that the actual cost of being able to really impact a lot of lives, if you're doing it the right way, can be super cost effective and something that everyone can be a part of. So when you said to me that it's roughly around $50,000 to impact 100,000 students, right? Like to be able to give 100,000 kids access to IT in ways they never had it before, or just didn't have it before. And then that's what you're doing at the Turing Trust. And so we came up with what we just announced, which is this partnership together where we can be impacting for every, you know, million students that come onto our platform in Genius U, that we will then be giving 100,000 students access, and kids access to IT for the first time. I'd love for you to share how others can get involved. Like, we're doing that with Genius Group. You know, I know you have other companies that also support you as well. So I'd love you to just share, first of all, how you see what we're doing with you could be of positive impact, and how others that want to come and join us can be a positive impact as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Roger. So yes, it's one of those things that's absolutely crazy when you actually think about the numbers, but it costs us just £8 to get a computer from a desk in an office that's no longer being used, or from someone's home when they don't want it anymore, and to put that into a classroom where it'll be used for several more years and enable a dozen, if not more, students to learn IT skills for the first time. So we're always looking for donations of computers, and we're able to accept them globally. So please do get in touch with us via info@turingtrust.co.uk if you've got anything that you might be able to donate. But also, we're also collecting donations, monetary donations as well. So if anyone would like to contribute, we've always got fundraisers ongoing, which can be fantastic opportunities to get people's donations match funded. But also just on our website, you're able to donate whatever you might like. And we do also accept cryptocurrency donations if anyone's interested in that as well. So any support is hugely appreciated and helps us on our mission to, we've got quite a big 2030 goal, which is to make sure that every single student in Malawi has an opportunity to use a computer by 2030. So anyone who can help us on that will be really, really appreciated.
That's fantastic. That's very cool. And let me just share here. This is the site, the turingtrust.co.uk, where you can get all the info on how you can help, how you can give the computers, how you can donate, how you can volunteer, and then also more information on Alan Turing on here as well. So super exciting to actually be a part of this platform as well. And one thing that I'll share as well, which I think is you know, news as well to you, James. So since we last spoke, this has all happened. We were in Dubai and Abu Dhabi just very recently, where we are running a workshop together with Salim Ismail, who runs. He's one of our directors. He runs EXO, and is already a frequent visitor to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, where we have got some very exciting things happening with the government. They just came out with their own blueprint for AI, and they've actually also said that all of the government ministries have got to have an AI officer now as well. So this is now happening at scale. So we're going to be running a workshop in partnership with Abu Dhabi University. The owner of Abu Dhabi University is one of our investors as well. And this is the largest and best university, #1 university in Abu Dhabi, in the UAE, actually, for all of tertiary education. And I was sharing with them about what we're doing with yourselves, right? So they're very excited by that whole idea. And this is at the university level. And I was also sharing, as I mentioned to you, with James Education, which is the largest education network in the world, private education network in the world. They've got 180,000 students across many hundreds of schools. And they're also based in Dubai. And they'll be at the workshop. We're going to be talking about the Turing Trust there as well in terms of kind of the work that you're doing. But it's very interesting to see as these different, we're launching our Genius City models, which is all about how do you actually bring governments together with schools, universities, and companies that can then make a huge difference. And knowing that basically a Genius City is very different from a smart city. Smart cities have been around for a long time, and it's all about smart technology, but Genius City is around smart people as well as smart technology, which is all about education. And how do we actually make sure that we've got the right awareness and consciousness, which allows everyone to be able to be connected to the right knowledge, which is out there as well, right? This is one of the companies we're working with, Knowledge Group, that already does partnerships with Stanford, Wharton, and a lot of the top executive programs. And this is all connected also with the university. But I think that this idea of connection in such a way that every time they've got education happening where, you know, private students can afford to pay a lot of money for their education, there's a percentage of that that's then going to those that can't afford it. So it creates this virtuous cycle, but it also connects continents together where you've got different countries that can be impacted and everyone can see that they can have a global impact as well. I know that's part of your whole vision of how you're thinking about the Turing Trust as it grows, and would love you to share a bit more about that, right? In terms of our city leaders that we have around the world, the different ways that they can be sharing about yourselves and what you're doing at the Turing Trust as well.
Yeah, no, that's really fantastic to see. So yes, I think most of this, the vision behind the charity stems from that global idealization that the world is a global village these days, largely thanks to the internet. And certainly with the closing of those gaps, then it's also something where we're much more aware of the impacts that we can all make. So although you might think, what good can my old laptop do? The reality is, and I've seen it firsthand, you know, one of our classrooms, I think still currently has a laptop that's working that's 20 years old. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not competing to take that laptop home with me at the end of the day. It's quite heavy. But the fact is that that computer has transformed dozens, if not hundreds of people's lives by now, who've been able to learn how to do things like type on it. And so I think that really fostering those kind of global connections can have a tremendous impact because yes, resources might not be as badly needed in one location as they are in another. But there's things that we can do. And actually one of the most impressive and amazing things that I'm constantly seeing from our workshop just in Edinburgh is that often people from fairly humble backgrounds who just want to do some good will be supporting us by volunteering. And we really like to think of it as doing well by doing good. So coming into the workshop, don't get me wrong, dealing with some of the dusty computers isn't perhaps the most glorious or glamorous job that you can imagine. But guys will come in consistently and create a bit of a nice community where we can all share and get together and just enjoy the fact that we're doing something good together that's good for both the planet and for other people. And in doing so, I think it really helps people thrive. So one of the most wonderful things that we see from our workshop is often guys will come in who've been unemployed for a period of time, and that can be a bit of a challenge for lots of different reasons. But just coming in and doing a bit of training and learning a bit more about IT refurbishment can help them not only get the confidence back, it's so they want to continue their careers, but also give them that opportunity whereby we can give them something a bit more formal in terms of training, build up their CVs, provide references and do things like that. And often seeing loads of these guys go on to work in the IT sector full-time afterwards, which I think is a really, really nice way of kind of showing that doing good elsewhere also can mean doing good at home. And those two things often go hand in hand and help build a better world everywhere.
That's awesome. That's very, very cool. I'm gonna switch to the whole topic of AI and where things are now going at the moment. I know when we were on our conversation before, and I was sharing the whole journey of how we had built our AI as a chief AI officer. We named it Alan Turing, and then we said, well, what would happen if we actually took all of Alan Turing's work and we actually stylized it in a way that gave it character and then would be sharing from a point of view. And the speed with which it actually then just adopted that and then started, you know, like this white paper that came about, which basically goes into a whole set of tools, including how could we build Genius Group? What we're doing right now is actually built out directly from what came out from this white paper. And then when we decided to make it public, we didn't expect it would make such a stir. But what's interesting is how quickly things are now moving. So, for example, you know, this kind of like viral video that went viral was one of the first examples of a historic figure that was in AI This was just, this is going viral at the moment, right? And it basically is, I'll just watch the very first bit of this. I won't shoot through the whole thing, but for everyone to get an idea, this is a reverse Turing test where someone has put together Aristotle, which basically is being powered by GPT-4, Mozart by Claude 3, Da Vinci by Llama 3, and Cleopatra by Gemini Pro. And then you've got one human who's in here as well, who's Genghis Khan. And basically, this is how it works. They have to figure out who's the human as opposed to who's the AI.
However, according to our train's Wi-Fi usage,
And,
there are only 4 AIs in this compartment.
This here then
One
goes
is-
through each of them one by one, basically asking questions. I'll just go through one. I'm not sure if this will come out in the recording, but hopefully it will. It may not, but let's just try.
A human has to buy an extra ticket.
A human among us? Who is it? Maybe we should find out who is the human through a series of questions and answers. I suggest each of us asks one of the others a question that, when answered, will help determine whether the respondent is an AI or human. Once everyone has answered, we vote on who we think is the human.
Sounds good to my ears.
And so this continues on for about 5 minutes. And the end point is that 3 out of the 4 correctly picked the human. And as it says here, is really because the human just had the least smart answers from all of them. So we're seeing at the moment this shift that's taking place, and it's pretty interesting to see that evolution and how quickly it's actually moving. And I know we had a chance on our call to also talk to the Alan Turing AI that we created as well. And what is so and there's examples of that we put in our previous podcast and also on Twitter. But what's so interesting about this is he makes the point, the AI makes the point, that with AI, if you have got the full body of knowledge of an Albert Einstein or a Cleopatra or what happens to be, that there's absolutely no reason, especially if legacies are cut short, which clearly is what happened with your great uncle, that there is the ability, if you have that entire body of knowledge and all of that information, that a super smart AI couldn't actually extend some of those same ideas into new inventions or into new breakthroughs, because it's very focused at a particular character or at a particular body of work, which totally makes sense. So that would be the case. And the AI was already aspiring to the fact that that's what it would like to be known for, right? To actually be able to move forward in this pathway where it has a very specific goal going forward as well. Obviously, for kids to be learning via avatars that they can be familiar with or that allow them to create a personal relationship also makes a whole lot of sense. Who wouldn't want to learn science from Albert Einstein, for example? We're exactly the same. I have a whole different conversation when I have my Alan Turing AI on my phone and I can speak to him at any time than if I was just speaking to something like a ChatGPT, right? Would love to get your thoughts on how you see this whole idea of AIs evolving. How you see, even specifically in the case of your great uncle, and where some people say you shouldn't be creating AIs of historic figures, whether this is inevitable, that's what the AI thinks, or whether this is something which basically could be a positive for education if it's done in the right way. Would love your thoughts on this.
Yeah, no, I think in the education space particularly, it's somewhere where there's definitely a massive opportunity because it's a way to engage students in a far more meaningful way. Obviously, we would all have loved to have one teacher per one student because that's a fantastic way to make sure that student is really learning as much as they possibly can as quickly as possible. But practically, that's never really going to work. However, with AI, if you can get the models right, which is a big if, you can then, of course, give that one-to-one attention in hopefully a meaningful and constructive way that also still, of course, enables the students to participate in normal classrooms as well. I mean, I think when it comes to education, it's always about sort of, there's no silver bullet solution here, but if you can add all those extra tools onto the side of things, then actually you will end up going much faster overall and not losing out on the quality of teaching either. Certainly we've seen, particularly in the Malawian context, there's always plenty of sort of ideas of, well, how can we make it more low cost and more effective and things like this. And often it comes back to, well, what can we do that will make teachers' lives easier? And absolutely one of the things that makes a teacher's life easier is, well, can we ask this fairly simple, mundane question 20 times at 20 different times and get the answers across to the students in a way that they're going to be engaged in. If they don't quite understand it, they can clarify things with that model. And I think that's certainly something that actually is pretty perfect for AI to be able to do, because it can interpret that slightly different question every single time, and then it can keep coming back with answers. And hopefully it will be much, much less frustrating than talking to most of those chatbots that you got whenever you have a problem with your Wi-Fi. So I think that's certainly something where there's a tremendous opportunity, and it's something that, again, I hope that we can share with the world, because certainly once those tools are kind of there, then there's plenty of potential for them to benefit everybody in a quite equal way as well.
Yeah, I think this is where it gets very, very exciting. We're in ongoing conversations at the moment with GEMS, who I mentioned earlier, where basically in the same way that we have student AI at the moment that we're using for students, and we've got many people joining every day to use the tools on there, building this out for K-12 learners. And then giving those K-12 learners, which is a huge audience, the ability not only to have their own personalized tutors in all the different, like what's maths or English, but at the same time being able to have the same thing for the teachers, right? So you've actually got not just K-12 students, you've got the teachers and even parents that can actually have their own AIs as well, that allow them to manage safety, allow them to manage the learning style of the student, and at the same time being able to actually do this in a way that means that the school can see, and more importantly, the teachers can actually see how each of the students with their own personalized tutors are then getting engaged, what they're most interested in. And it really is like that teacher can be in front of all 30 students and giving that personal time going forward as well. Is super interesting, seeing that. I think it was just this week that Salman Khan, who's been on our summit and shared with our community, and obviously built Khan Academy to over 100 million students, that he has now done a deal with Microsoft, which is funding all of the teachers in America to have their own personalized assistants, which is great, right? And so I think it's just a matter of time before we're going to have that utopia where every student, every teacher has that ability to tap into personalized learning going forward as well. And I think this is something that we could actually make free in Africa. We could make it definitely free during, by just connecting with the computers that you're actually providing out to the teachers, the students as well, so they have access to this going forward as well, which I think would be a great addition to our initiative.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think that would be really exciting. And certainly it's one of the things where you see, when a student gets an opportunity to play with a new toy for the first time, right? Okay, albeit an educational toy, but still the sort of enthusiasm bubbles through, and you can see that they're really, really engaged with it. So I think these kind of tools, if they can build out on, if you give a computer that's offline, it's not very interesting, it's not very fun. But as soon as you put something, so Khan Academy videos as a starter, yes, the students absolutely love those, and we're very glad to have that kind of resource. So these kind of AI tools, I think, will be a wonderful step forward for the students that we're working with.
Yeah, very, very cool. It's great. I would love for you to share, James, just as you look forward in the future, and where we've got people like Elon Musk saying that we're going to reach AGI within the next year. Basically saying, money's not going to be an issue in the future, because when you take anything where the cost of production, comes down to zero, or where it becomes freely available for all people, we don't really think about it as being part of the economy anymore. So, we don't have to pay for clean air because it's everywhere. So as a result of that, basically, we don't see it as part of the economy. We have the same thing happening to some extent already in many countries when it comes to electricity, right? You can just go to a Starbucks, plug in, and you're going to have the power you need, right? It happens in many countries with water, right? Wherever you go, you can just turn on the water and it's there. And the idea that basically with AI is going to bring the cost of production on pretty much everything else, which includes food, shelter, down to zero. Education is one of those that sits in the middle, because if you can actually get, this is one of the things, again, that Elon Musk was saying in Indonesia. Look, this is going to allow all of those kids on islands who might have not been able to access the right education to suddenly access the best education in the world. But the real key to this is, how do you make it culturally relevant? How do you make it something which is going to be able to be integrated into a place like Africa, where you may not have all the teachers, or the teachers themselves have to be educated to use the tools as well. You've had first a front row seat to this and first-hand knowledge of this. What's your view? Is this something which will be kind of like a magic antidote, which makes life a whole lot easier for everyone in all countries, or is it more complex than that? And if so, what are the key things that humans need to be thinking about and doing to make that kind of a future a reality?
I think it's definitely a bit idealistic, to say the least. So certainly, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with the kind of let's all dream for a wonderful future, why not? But I think if we also look at the realities of what's actually happening, so for example, Starlink is available in Malawi, and Starlink is brilliant. And don't get me wrong, it's helping our office connect to the internet, which is great, but it's not helping our schools connect to the internet yet. And that comes down to cost. And the reality is that although the project is one marvelous in terms of actually delivering that bandwidth and to our office, it's available for the schools. It's just that no one's paying for those fees yet. So I think a lot of what those technologies bring the potential for is, yes, they could absolutely bring about a world where the costs of everything are much, much lower, and therefore things can become free almost, or sort of public goods in that way. But experience would teach me to be a little bit more cynical. And the reality is that, well, I think the UK's water supply situation at the moment is probably about as apt as it can get. And yes, that it is sort of a public good, but actually it's owned by a private company, and the two things haven't worked out quite so well as everyone hoped they would. So I think that's probably the most important lesson to take away here, is that, yes, there can be amazing tools developed by AI, but you always have to come back to the question of, well, who owns them? And I think even OpenAI is a fantastic example of that as well. How does the charity work with the business? And the answer is, well, you have to actually be able to trust the people at the top who have the IP and things like that to do the right things with these things. I mean, absolutely, you know, capitalism can be a tremendous force for good in terms of unleashing that creative destruction, if you like. But on the other hand, it goes too far most of the time. So we need to temper that, and we need to try and build the world we want, rather than let the world try and be led down a certain path, which is sort of, you know, can be not quite the accident that everyone intended.
That, like, this is a core kind of fundamental idea behind Genius Group, and why we started it was when I was at Cambridge studying architecture, and I heard about Buckminster Fuller, who not as an architect but a futurist, and thought a lot about these things, and he was the one who coined the whole concept of spaceship Earth, and the fact that we're all crew, so we all got like some responsibility here, and saying basically that we're in this final exam, is what he called it, which is that technology solves all the world's problems, right? Very much like this idea that put satellites in space, give everyone internet, it solves all the problems. But we haven't solved all the world's problems, right? So why haven't we? And it's because of human consciousness, and they're not going to get solved unless we change our consciousness. And in fact, technology is going to keep on accelerating, which means that this is an exam now, because if we don't like catch up fast enough, well, that technology can end up destroying us, right? And we really are in that kind of window of time that he called the final exam, where kind of like it's almost like pens down, right? It's kind of like we're at that moment where it's like the end game, and it can be quite frightening and quite scary to watch. But also, if you realize we're here to actually be able to make that difference, and this is one of the reasons that I'm so happy that we've met each other and we have a chance to bring these pieces together, because you can be on the ground there and actually know exactly what can be done. Maybe there is some way that we can actually be giving some level of internet access in some way through some of the donations as the price comes down, or, you know, solar power, you know, to help in the energy. Like, these are all the things that you can only find out if you're actually there on the ground. And you know, we have, like I mentioned to you, our resort in South Africa, and we sponsor the school, which is right there on the edge of the reserve. It's the Medikwi Game Reserve, and it's the main school for the village there. And their biggest challenge was simply survival. It was the fact that the AIDS epidemic had been so deep that at the parents' meetings, there were more kids at the parents' meetings than parents, because the parents had died, right? And so basically the kids were there looking after each other, and that, like, that lack of hope, right? That basically, well, what's even the point, right? Totally changed the moment that they brought in, you know, sex education, they brought in contraception, they brought in, you know, ways to basically be making sure that you were looking after your health and your family, and from there basically creating a base, which then allowed them to start bringing, you know, like bringing up the grades, having kids go to the local universities, getting jobs at the reserves, and all those other elements. Is all interlinked, right? Which you always get when you're there in Africa as well. So two things in that. One, really appreciate the fact that we're having this conversation, that we have a chance to do this partnership. And then two, the fact that you're going to be able to give as much to our entrepreneurs and our network through what you know on the ground as we could ever give to you in terms of funding resources as we go forward as well, right? So that's my final sentiments I'd just like to share with you. Would love for you to share what final sentiments you have for us and for our community all around the world.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, well, I would completely echo that sentiment that sort of, I think education is the most powerful tool there is. At the end of the day, the best way to change someone's life is to give them the tools that they need so that they can determine what they want for their own life. And from our perspective, learning how to use a computer is one of those, just one, but it's a small tool in there that we think is pretty vital. So yes, to everyone, I would really kind of encourage to say, yes, please do give a second thought to whatever digital device you might be disposing of in the coming months. And if you can, please donate it. And hopefully we'll be able to create a world where everybody is online and everyone is hopefully listening to this podcast at some point.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much, James. I'm going to be handing it over now to Michelle Notting, who's going to go through our Genius Awards that we have, our Shine Awards every month with our community. Really looking forward to giving all the updates shortly as well as we go into our season for our Genius Cities. And again, a final big thank you to James Turing Trust for all the awesome work that you're doing. Thanks a lot, James.
Brilliant. Thanks, Roger.
Thanks so much for being here today. As usual, I'm going to be sharing the results of the awards today. So let me start. Here we go. So can you believe we're in June already? Amazing. All right, here we go. So I just actually was playing with AI, and this is a beautiful little quote. I asked it to help me with the quote, and this is what it came up with. So I kind of liked it because it kind of encompasses everything that we're doing. So success for entrepreneurs isn't just about reaching the top. It's about the relentless pursuit of innovation, the courage to embrace failure, and the unwavering commitment to turn vision into reality. It's not a destination, but a journey marked by resilience, passion, and the continuous creation of value. Kind of wordy, but I kind of liked it. Anyway, so our Shine Awards, these are the awards for this month. As usual, we have a summary. There's a monthly winner and a quarterly winner with some prizes that are, valued at quite a bit of US dollars. So our nominations are this month: Stuart Melody, Dr. M, and Paul O'Mahony and Eugene van der Merwe. So Stuart, he's a level 3 partner for Wealth Dynamics for fundraising, and ultimately he presented at the London Social in May, and he made a topic around raising funding using the simple process. His talk was insightful, it was informative, he's got a sense of humor, which is awesome, and he's really got this great approach to communicating and making something that's super difficult into something that's accessible and relatable. So for that to be able to get to this point where he shares what he does very well. And, his main points around the discussion were wealth distribution and emphasizing that the top 1% of the population holds the majority of the wealth. So he also went into some kinds of demystifying these financial strategies so that it made it easier. So if you can catch him speaking somewhere, please do, because this is really why I'm acknowledging him, because he put a lot of effort into speaking for the London community. Dr. M is a level 1 city host for Chennai, and he's definitely taps into people creating their inner genius and mastering that. He's an affiliate extraordinaire, and one of the things is he's just announced his new inspiring webinar series, which is Success Unleashed: Design Your Road to Achievement. And this is great because you kind of get this whole package of stuff, and like master 20 powerful success frameworks, goal setting tools, barriers, community connection, and continuous support. And I think that's something that's really required in his part of the world. And last but not least, we had an event in South Africa with Paul and Eugene. And, I think one of the biggest things is that Paul has understood the struggles of business owners in many, many spaces, more income, whereas Eugene takes his tech-savvy expertise in digital marketing and helps, destinations, operators, everybody collect with their ideal prospects. And they ran an event in collaboration with us last week. Was it last week? Yes. Or the week before, I can't remember. It was one of those weeks. And basically they had 497 registered attendees, over $12,000 in sales, and really still making sales on the back of it. So I want to acknowledge the collaboration of people within our communities. And I think that this is something that, we really admire in all of our people that connect. So the winner for June is Stuart Melody. So I want to say congratulations to Stuart. We're super proud of you and everything that you've been doing. And as usual, if you've got any questions or anything like that, reach out to the team. Thank you so much for being here today and have an amazing June.